Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Kiorkof, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 2 quarterback rankings for the 2020 fantasy football season. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about my top 16 quarterback rankings, and before that, we'll talk about some matchups going into this week, exactly who has the most advantageous matchup in Week 2 and could potentially be a streamer this week in case you are dealing with some quarterback complications on your specific team. Outside of that, I want to thank you guys for the incredible support. You guys have been absolutely fantastic. We just surpassed the 24,000 subscriber mark. Big 24, that's an incredible number. Now we go to the big quarter, 25K. That's the next goal. So join the community, join the channel, click the subscribe button. We'll be making fantasy football content here for the entirety of the 2020 season. I'm going to try to get to 7 uploads a week, once every day. So that is the goal and that's the plan. So join the channel. There'll be content coming your way all the time. So check your sub box. Without further ado, let's go ahead and begin. And let's start talking about quarterbacks going into Week 2, specifically starting off with matchups. The graphic that you can see on screen talks about how many points defenses gave up to opposing quarterbacks last week in a 4-point per passing touchdown format. Now, we don't have a great sample size. We only have 1 week of play in 2020, but as the weeks progress, we'll get a better idea of which defenses are giving up a lot of points to opposing quarterbacks and which quarterbacks we could potentially start as a streaming option or for the rest of the season based on their upcoming schedule. Now, as of this moment in time, the Atlanta Falcons are giving up the most points to opposing quarterbacks as Russell Wilson in Week 1 had an incredible performance of having just as many incompletions as he had passing touchdowns. Aaron Rodgers, he himself, diced up the Minnesota Vikings secondary. Again, they have some great safeties over there, but their corner production has not been great over the last couple seasons. The New York Jets, they themselves got diced up by Josh Allen. I mean, I haven't seen Josh Allen throw for over 70% passing completion percentage in a very long time, and that's a great sight to see, especially with his mobility and being able to score on the ground as the goal line threat there. But again, hopefully this kind of gives you some context as to how many points quarterbacks scored against opposing defenses. And then in terms of the tougher matchups going into potentially Week 2, again, the New England Patriots over the last couple of years have been one of the best defenses against opposing quarterbacks. Russell Wilson takes them on Sunday Night Football. That's going to be exciting. Cincinnati Bengals lock down Tyrod Taylor. What are they going to do on Thursday night against Baker Mayfield? Can they show some of the same looks? Can they pass rush, get after Baker, make it uncomfortable for him, and then potentially take a lead? Of course, these are the defenses that really made it difficult for opposing quarterbacks in Week 1, and potentially you're avoiding some of these matchups. But again, if, for example, you have Matt Ryan playing against Dallas, that's no problem because, again, Jared Goff, even though he threw for 275 yards, he did not, he didn't end up closing off drives with touchdowns because Malcolm Brown comes in, similar to how Todd Gurley used to do in the past, and stole those touchdowns. So, again, we'll just keep an eye on that as of right now. But those are the matchups going into Week 2. Hopefully these help you guys out as the season progresses on. All right, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to begin off with our number 1 quarterback on the week. Lamar Jackson should not really be a surprise. Week 2 quarterbacks are pretty much going to be the same as Week 1 quarterbacks with a little bit of an adjustment here and there based on matchups and based on performances from last week. Lamar Jackson had an incredible performance, throwing 20 for 25 passing, had 275 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, 45 rushing yards. And to be honest, playing against the Houston secondary this upcoming week and the Houston front 7 in terms of how they really couldn't stop the Chiefs from running the ball on Thursday night last week. I think as of right now, going into this matchup, Lamar Jackson should be an incredible play. Last time he played against the Houston Texans was last regular season. He had 4 passing touchdowns and 80 rushing yards against them. I don't think they're going to be able to stop Lamar Jackson and his Ravens passing attack. He's an automatic play and my number 1 on the week. Moving on to our number 2, we have ourselves Patrick Mahomes, another one of these automatic starts at the quarterback position. And though he only had 211 passing yards last week, he still had 3 passing touchdowns in a game in which they ran the ball for majority of the second half. Again, Patrick Mahomes going forward is going to have matchups in which his defense is going to be struggling here and there. And that's going to force him to score the ball more. And hopefully that is something that we could see as the weeks progress. But in this matchup against the Chargers, where the Chargers offense is as lackluster as they are at this moment in time, I think Patrick Mahomes is probably a stable number 2, has always the upside of scoring 5 touchdowns in a given week. But as of right now, I don't think that they're going to be pushed to the limits and kind of force Patrick Mahomes to have to put up that 4 or 5 passing touchdown game. And therefore, he's just a safe number 2 play. And there's the reason why you drafted him is because you can automatically start him without even batting an eye despite the matchups. Move on to our number 3. We have ourselves Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers wasn't even on the list last week because, again, I thought Minnesota's defense was probably going to lock him down. Last year against Minnesota was not playing well. Aaron Rodgers came out the gates hot and dominated that defense, had 364 passing yards, 4 passing touchdowns. this week has an incredible matchup against the Detroit Lions. And why is that the case? Because the Detroit Lions secondary is struggling with injuries. They sent a cornerback to the IR. Desmond Trufant's dealing with a hamstring injury. Jeff Okta, who missed week 1, will be active in week 2. But again, he is a rookie cornerback. And if he's going to have the responsibility of covering Devontae Adams, boy, is he going to be in trouble. So I expect Aaron Rodgers, this Green Bay Packers offense that looked incredible in week 1, to come out and be at home. Lambeau, they're going to be comfortable this week and dominate against the Lions secondary and really boat race and blow them out early. So I think Aaron Rodgers comes out the gates hot, scores a lot of points, and it can coast with Aaron Jones in the second half in this game. But unless Matthew Stafford, the gunslinger, wants to come out and put up a fight, hopefully that's the case. We get a back and forth shootout. Our number 4 for today is Dak Prescott. And as of right now, I look at the matchup against the Atlanta Falcons and I think to myself, well, the Atlanta Falcons secondary is in a very rough spot. To be honest, Dak Prescott will probably be able to take advantage of it with Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, CeeDee Lamb, and his offensive line protection. And of course, Zeke being able to dice him up on the ground or through the air. Regardless, Dak Prescott is probably in one of the better matchups this upcoming week. Again, considering Russell Wilson was the number 1 overall quarterback last week against Atlanta's secondary. Now, as of right now, I think to myself, Dak Prescott's probably going to be pushed and be given the opportunity to throw the ball and potentially have 3 passing touchdowns. But the upside lies in the competition. If Matt Ryan is going to fight back like he did last week and have himself 54 passing attempts or something of that nature, it's going to keep Dak Prescott on the field for all 4 quarters and keep him scoring fantasy points. I think that kind of competition, that kind of high-scoring shootout leads to more fantasy success, and that's why I have Dak Prescott as my number 4 this week. Moving on to number 5, we have ourselves a Russell Wilson. And though I've talked about how incredible Russell Wilson has been in week 1, again, with his 4 passing touchdowns, being able to throw the ball 35 times in a week and just be the lifeblood of the team, he's been the MVP of his team for quite some time now. And now that they've given him more and more opportunity, I really think that Russell Wilson could be on this run of being a MVP candidate this upcoming season like he's been in many years prior. Again, 4 out of the last 5 seasons, he's thrown 31 plus touchdowns. A lot of people ignore that, but here comes Russell Wilson regardless. I don't have him at number 5 because I'm slighting him or I'm disrespecting him. It's more of a respect for Bill Belichick and that secondary. Again, Stephon Gilmore, the McCourty brothers, they have talent there. I think they are very experienced cornerbacks, and they're going to make it difficult on Metcalf and Lockett and Greg Olsen. So as of right now, I think that Russell Wilson is really going to have to prove to everybody what he's made of on Sunday Night Football in Foxborough. That is an incredible matchup. But again, Russell Wilson is a guy that you're still firing up regardless. He's a top 5 quarterback this week. Number 6 is Josh Allen. Like I talked about earlier, he threw for over 70% passing completion percentage against the Jets. Now he takes on the Miami Dolphins. And though the Miami Dolphins have two good cornerbacks, Xavier Howard, Byron Jones, and John Brown's been dealing with a foot injury. As of right now, I look at Josh Allen and I think to myself, everything that this offense does is ran through Josh Allen, even through the running game. I mean, there are designed runs for Josh Allen. He ran the ball 14 times last week for a reason, had 57 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown, on top of the fact that he threw for 300 yards for the first time in his career. I talked about that for so long. I strung it over his head for so long. Josh Allen had not thrown for 300 yards in a single game in his NFL career. He did that in week 1 of 2020. Here comes Josh Allen, guys. This is the breakout season potentially, especially with his upcoming schedule, the first 8-9 games of the season. He plays against the Dolphins this week. And I went and I looked at it in his career thus far. And this is going to be his 3rd year, but in the 2 years prior, Josh Allen has averaged 31.83 fantasy points per game against the Miami Dolphins. Just putting it out there. And that's in 4-point per passing touchdown formats. He is going to feast against this defense. He's comfortable against them typically. And I think Josh Allen, if in fact John Brown is fully healthy and ready to go, is even a better play. He's my number 6. Moving on to number 7, we have ourselves Kyler Murray. Another one of these quarterbacks that was their leading rusher this week. Kyler Murray had 91 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown, 230 passing yards and a passing touchdown against the San Francisco 49ers defense, in which he was able to pull together a victory for his team against a team that got as far as the Super Bowl and was 1 quarter away from locking down a W. So as of right now, we look at Kyler Murray, the potential. What is he going to do against the Washington football team? The Washington football team looked like a good defense in the second half, mainly because of their pass rush in their front 7. Ryan Kerrigan, Chase Young coming off the edge. That in itself is something to be concerned about. Again, because Kyler Murray's offensive line over the past couple of years has fallen apart. But when I think about what their offensive line was able to do against Nick Bosa last week, there is a possibility that they can continue to improve with the ability for Kyler to be able to manage his way out of the pocket, extend plays with his legs. It is going to give them an extra layer of depth in order to give Kyler Murray some extra fantasy points with his legs. I think this matchup is great for them. I think, to be honest, Washington's defense isn't as good as they kind of proved last week. And I think Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins, this offense with Kenny Drake are going to be able to expose that this week. He's my number 7 quarterback. Moving on to number 8, we have ourselves Matt Ryan. I mentioned him before. Again, Matt Ryan's going to have to throw the ball maybe 50 times a game for the entire year. This secondary, this defense really needs to be overhauled. I mean, they need to draft, they need to hire, they got to bring in some big money players, and they haven't been able to do that over the last couple of years, and they've been injured a lot of the times in the secondary and or the front seven. But this upcoming week, he plays against the Dallas Cowboys secondary. Again, like I was mentioning, if he throws the ball 50 times a game, he's going to throw a couple picks here and there. That's going to eventually happen. But with the amount of wide receiver help he has with Calvin Ridley, Julio Jones, now Russell Gage taking a part, Hayden Hurst will eventually get in there. I expect Matt Ryan to every week be a guy that's in a shootout or potentially playing against the clock and how many times he can score until that clock hits 0-0-0 in the end of the fourth. So I think Matt Ryan's another one of these guys that will always be relevant because of his defense kind of forcing him to be. I'm just curious to see what happens if they take an early lead, where they'll kind of sit their offense, and will they just try to run the ball, or will they just continue to pound by throwing the ball in the direction of Julio and Calvin Ridley. So we'll just have to wait and see. But regardless, he's another great start this week. Cam Newton's my number 9 on Sunday Night Football. Again, he's facing the Seattle Seahawks, and Seattle's defense played well to an extent. Again, Matt Ryan torched him in the second half. But Cam Newton, is he capable of doing that? I mean, last week only had 155 passing yards. Didn't even have a passing touchdown. Majority of his work in terms of fantasy production came on the ground. 75 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. A lot of designed runs for him, specifically on the goal line, down in the red zone. These plays were designed for Cam Newton to run the ball. And that in itself can give him fantasy relevance. If you're going to have 75 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown, that's 13.5 fantasy points right there. All you got to do is put up 200 passing yards and you're good to go. To be honest, that is a 21.5 point week in fantasy. You don't even have to throw a passing touchdown at that rate. So Cam Newton's always going to be that much more valuable in a 4-point per passing touchdown format, because all these other quarterbacks, even if they throw 2 touchdowns, aren't going to be able to keep up with his ability to run the ball and be able to separate himself from them with those statistics. So again, this upcoming week, I expect him to play well. I expect a lot of these design runs down on the goal line. And I expect him to kind of expand the offense more and more as the weeks go on and show more of what Cam Newton's capable of doing through the air with his arm. All right, our number 10 is Tom Brady. And Tom Brady has a lot of question marks surrounding him. As of right now, the report this morning was that Mike Evans is over the hump in terms of his hamstring injury. He's good to go. He should be fine this week. That's great. That's going to give him a little bit of a boost in my rankings in terms of the wide receiver position. Again, rankings are subject to change. So that's perfectly fine. Now, going into week 2, we also have to kind of give ourselves a little bit of a cushion, because Chris Godwin might not even be able to play because of the concussion protocol. That's fine. Scotty Miller will fill in. You still have Gronk. You still have J.J. Howard. But again, they're playing against the soft Panthers defense. And what does that mean? That's going to lead Tom Brady to probably having to hand off the ball to Leonard Fournette and Ronald Jones 25 to 30 times this week, because it is going to be such an easy option to be able to move the ball down the field. I mean, that's what the Raiders did last week. They were easily able to hand the ball off and just let them go. So Josh Jacobs dominated Ronald Jones, Leonard Fournette. I think they could possibly dominate this upcoming week as well. So even with Tom Brady not having his offensive pieces, they're going to be able to move down the field. It's going to be a question of whether or not he's going to have that touchdown upside down in the red zone. He had a rushing touchdown last week, 2 passing touchdowns. And I think overall, he needs to reestablish himself. They got to get a win under their belt, and hopefully Tom Brady's ready to, take out this division opponent and put up a lot of points. So I'm expecting him to play well, especially if, in fact, Chris Godwin plays. That's just an extra level of fantasy production for him that we're just not really accounting for, and could make him a better quarterback as of right now. All right, Drew Brees is my number 11. Okay, so without Michael Thomas, Drew Brees did not look like a great quarterback in terms of fantasy production last week. I mean, just looking at his stats, 160 passing yards, that is not a great number. Michael Thomas being missing in this offense is going to definitely underwhelm the performances of Drew Brees. I think you're going to see a lot of Alvin Kamara touchdowns on the ground in the red zone in comparison to the games in which Drew Brees is throwing for 300 yards, because when he throws for 300 yards, 140 of those are going to Michael Thomas. So I'm curious to see what they're going to do without him in this offense. Again, the Raiders defense is not good enough to be able to stop them, whether it's on the ground or through the air. So Drew Brees is going to succeed regardless. It's going to be a matter of whether or not Drew Brees can score those passing touchdowns, or at least get Emmanuel Sanders, Jared Cook, Alvin Kamara really going in the passing game to be able to unlock a little bit of his fantasy potential. So I think he's capable of it. He's my number 11. Deshaun Watson sits at number 12, and that's mainly because of the fact that he plays against the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, the last time he played against Baltimore, it was not fun. They lost 41-7 in, week 12 in 2019. I mean, it was just a blowout. I'm not sure about the week, but they got blown out, and Deshaun Watson was miserable in that game. And to be honest, Deshaun Watson was a little bit miserable last week. I mean, 253 passing yards, a passing touchdown, 27 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown was all in a negative game script. They barely had the lead early in the game with that early touchdown. Again, they were trying to knock off the cobwebs without any preseason games. But Deshaun Watson against Baltimore in that secondary and that defense is not going to be an easy task, especially when Lamar Jackson is putting up 3 or 4 touchdowns this upcoming week. I could potentially see Deshaun Watson getting himself in a negative game script, trying to pass himself out of it, and then turning over the ball consecutively. That in itself, a scary prospect. I'm hoping that Deshaun Watson could just come out and be consistent and put up his 20 points and boot out. But to be honest, I'm not sure if that's the case. It's a very volatile matchup. I think there's a lot of concern to be had, but I'm hoping that Deshaun Watson can still lock down a top 12 quarterback performance here this week. Our number 13 is Big Ben Roethlisberger, and on Monday night, he looked pretty good. The running game was active. The passing game with Juju Smith-Schuster, Deontay Johnson, James Washington, hopefully Eric Ebron gets more utilization going forward. Those were all great positives for the team, and going forward, it's going to continue to get better as he gets more comfortable in this offense, and he gets a little bit more time under his belt. Again, he did not play for majority of the 2019 season with that elbow injury, so going into this upcoming week against Denver, I thought to myself, it's probably a pretty difficult matchup because that defense is so good on stopping the run, even without Von Miller. And now they're missing AJ Boye. I did talk about him potentially playing this upcoming week. But again, yesterday the news was he is being moved to the IR. So their number 1 cornerback is out. That even helps Juju more. That helps Ben Roethlisberger more. And he's another one of these great options at the quarterback position going forward. My only concern with Big Ben as of right now is what they're going to do with the right side of that offensive line. I think Zach Banner, their right tackle, could be missing some time here. And then David DeCastro was missing a lot of practice last week. So if the right side of their offensive line isn't as stable as we think, that's going to be a pretty big factor because, again, the success of Big Ben Roethlisberger resides on his protection and being able to keep him healthy and on the field. And his offensive line starts and ends that. So hopefully they can keep him protected and ready to go in week 2. Moving on to number 14, we have ourselves Ryan Tannehill. And Ryan Tannehill, again, is in an incredible matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And though Phillip Rivers wasn't able to take advantage of it, I expect Ryan Tannehill to do so because, again, they're going to come out. They're going to run the ball 25 plus times with Derrick Henry. He's going to dominate that defense. It's going to have the Jacksonville Jaguars have to fill the box. Here comes play action Ryan Tannehill. I mean, the last time he played against the Jacksonville Jaguars last season, he was 14 for 18 passing for 259 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, and had 7 rushes for 40 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. Had a 4-touchdown game against the Jacksonville Jaguars last year. And to be honest, I think he can easily do something like that again this week as a quarterback with the upside of there. But again, it's going to pretty much depend on whether or not Derrick Henry scores. I expect him to score, so it kind of decreases a little bit of Ryan Tannehill's value. Corey Davis dealing with a little bit of a hamstring injury this week. Hopefully AJ Brown gets back on track. But either way, this offense is looking good. And again, could potentially keep on pounding here and putting up some points. Again, Ryan Tannehill for the last, since week 7 of last season, has been averaging about 20 points in fantasy every single week since then, including last week. So again, Ryan Tannehill is playing fantastic football. And in terms of fantasy, he's getting the job done. Moving on to number 15, we have ourselves Carson Wentz. So as of right now, what I think about Carson Wentz, I think he's a far better quarterback than probably people give him credit for. In terms of fantasy, he's definitely been a better quarterback. He was a top 9 quarterback in fantasy last year. With his ability to move the ball with his legs, even that in itself gives him more opportunity. But the whole thing is, where was their offensive line? Where was their running game last week? That did not exist. And hopefully with Miles Sanders coming back, maybe Lane Johnson is going to be fully healthy this week, we could see potentially Carson Wentz get to that next level. They're going to be able to unleash Deshaun Jackson more and more, Jalen Reagor more and more as the season progresses. They obviously still have their 2 tight ends. Hopefully they use Zach Ertz a little bit more in comparison to what they did last week. 3 catches for 18 yards and not, as much as we'd like to see him be used, especially as one of the guys that should be the number 1 targets or receiving options of this team. I think Carson Wentz against the Rams is not that difficult of a matchup for him. And to be honest, could be a pretty good quarterback play in this week. So he's my number 15. All right, moving on to our last options. That's right, plural options. We have ourselves Kirk Cousins at number 16. And I'll have another quarterback that I want to talk about. But Kirk Cousins last week was pretty good against the Green Bay Packers. Was pretty efficient in terms of passing. 259 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 34 rushing yards on the ground. Had himself a pretty decent performance. Was able to find Adam Thielen. And he gets to play against the Indianapolis Colts this upcoming week, who Gardner Minshew absolutely dominated with 19 for 20 passing last week. I mean, that in itself, a great number. But Kirk Cousins will be able to unleash more and more of this offense as the weeks go on. Hopefully they can get their tight ends utilized a little bit more and potentially see Justin Jefferson get a little bit more production. So again, I think Kirk Cousins is not a bad option for a streaming quarterback. I think another good option for a streaming quarterback potentially is Mitch Trubisky. I think I put both these guys at number 16 because I really am very indecisive as to who I would want to play. Trubisky's probably the more riskier play, but to be honest, has more upside. He had 3 passing touchdowns against the Detroit Lions in week 1, plays against the New York Giants in week 2. Again, we saw Ben Roethlisberger be able to dominate that defense, and I know Mitchell Trubisky is not up to that level, but could potentially be able to put up some points here with Allen Robinson, Anthony Miller, Jimmy Graham, and Tariq Cohen, hopefully, if he gets more utilization this week. But I think he himself can have himself a pretty good week here in fantasy, and that's why I wanted to mention him. But again, those are my top 16, 17. There you go. You get 17 quarterbacks this week. Rankings for week 2 of the 2020 fantasy football season. I want to thank everybody for watching. Please smash that like button if you like today's video. Subscribe to the channel if you have not yet already. Click that bell notification button. And for those of you who are looking to find extra content, you can go over to patreon.com/Andrew Kiorkof. The details for that is down in the description. Weekly up-to-date rankings in terms of the flex position. Again, I don't answer flex questions for a reason. But again, if you want to find flex rankings there, you can go ahead and do that on the Patreon. We have a community Discord. We have a lot of community forums / get-togethers for waiver wires for Thursday Night Football, answering questions all the time, talking to each other, kind of getting everybody's opinion. So if you're interested in something like that, go ahead and check out Patreon. Right after this video, go and check out my tight end video. It's dropping right now. It'll probably be on the channel, so go ahead and check that out. Thank you very much. I'll see you guys. Peace.